Uh-oh, this isn't good. This is one for the tape heads out there that insist on using obsolete formats for things. In this case, good old 8-track cartridge. You know, the things that we had in our cars back in the late 60s, and we thought they were done by the early 70s? There's still people that have these things, and this is what can happen to them when they break down. I had a client bring me some 8-track tapes that he had. He was in a band and made some of his own recordings on 8-track. And he brought me a couple tapes to transfer over to digital. But he said, I don't know what's on these tapes. Some of them aren't labeled. If it's just got music or whatever on it, if it's not my music, don't bother transferring it. I plugged this tape in. It had the Canadian band Prism on it, obviously recorded off of a record or something, and it was playing, and I was kind of enjoying it. Spaceship Superstar was playing, and all of a sudden, it stopped. When I pulled the tape out, oh, Houston, we have a problem. You see, an 8-track tape is a continual loop tape. All the internal is inside the cassette, or the cartridge. There's no beginning and no end. The tape is spliced into a loop. So, as the tape is pulled out from the center of the spool, it automatically winds up onto the outside. One of the big problems with 8-track tapes was they tended to bind up and jam. One of his tapes is seized. It won't move at all because the tape itself has bound. But obviously what happened on this one is the splice let go. The splice is what pulls the tape back in to the loop. When the splice let go, the tape stopped being pulled in. As can be seen here, if I pull on the tape, it should be going back in, but it doesn't. So I ended up with some tape inside the machine. How much tape? Well, I don't know. Let's find out how much tape spooled into the machine. I only played it for a minute or so at 3 3/4 inches per second. And I had no indication that there was a problem, again, until it's just stopped playing. And by the time it had stopped playing, well, that tape is stuck in there. I guess I have to remove the mechanism to find out what it's jammed on. It's probably wound around the capstan shaft or something inside, but no more will come out than that. So we'll remove the screw that holds the chassis in place. And now the whole chassis should, oh, there might be a couple more. It might be another one over here. There. Now the chassis should push forward. We'll see what happened. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of tape, as you can see, all wound around the capstan and so forth. Fun. This was one of the problems with 8-track tapes, was that occasionally the splice would let go, and when that happened, well, you ended up with just an entire mess in here. How the heck did that get like that? I don't think it looped over. Maybe it looped over here. Maybe it looped over the pulley. Needless to say, this tape is pretty much shot. And now, I know what some of you are thinking. What could possibly be wrong with the player that caused this? Well, nothing. Because there's nothing on an 8-track player that can cause it to eat the tape. An 8-track player plays a loop tape. And that's all it does. It just moves the tape through the mechanism. But the tape is not extracted or anything. And there's no take-up spools or spindles or anything. It's a very simple mechanism. It just has a capstan shaft that turns, and the rest of the tape handling is done by the cartridge itself. So the only way an 8-track player can eat a tape like this is if the tape itself is defective. It might help if I put the belt back on it. But there's nothing in an 8-track player that can cause it to eat the tape. All it does has a motor, switch turns on the motor, the capstan shaft spins, the actual pinch roller is part of the cartridge itself. The tape is pushed up between the capstan shaft and the pinch roller, and it's pulled through the cassette or through the cartridge, and it winds itself up automatically. So there's nothing that can be done to prevent that from happening when that splice lets go inside the reel of tape. And this had been, I had played this I had been playing this tape. I was playing it through to see that there was no material of the fellow recorded on the tape. So I was on track number 4, program number 4, when this happened. So that the tape itself had already gone through the machine. My audio cord is hung up there. The tape itself had already gone through the machine a couple times as I was playing it through to see. So it wasn't like the splice had let go before I played it, because it had played a couple times. The splice let go on like the 3rd pass through. But this is not something that's easy to inspect because it's always buried in the loop of tape. Let's take apart the 8-track tape to see where the failure was. Well, there's the failure right there. There's the splice that let go. It fell out of the cassette. It fell out of the cartridge. So it's probably right around the front here. I bet you if I were to pull this side, the front would pop out. Let's just pop the cassette apart anyway. There are plastic tabs on here that I have to kind of pry out of the way. These, when they were assembled, they were a one-time, when they were assembled. This was manufactured by Learjet Stereo, by Harman Industries, Toronto, Canada. And yet, PSD Vancouver, BC was, I guess, the reseller of this Akai ERT cartridge, manufactured by Learjet Stereo. If anybody remembers that. Okay, look where it let go. The splice actually let go. It looks like way down here. Nope, it's up at the top here. Here it is. Here's where the splice let go. Right there, a couple of spools under. Right there. And there's the other end of it. There. Wonder if this can be put back together. Not that it's much use, but I wonder if I can put this back together and reel it back on here. So the only way to really reattach one of these is I've got to pull the slack out and get this to tighten up again so that it will actually spool the tape up as it's coming off of the spool. Because how these operate is as tape is removed, it causes the reel to rotate, which will take up the slack, but it will take it up at a faster rate than what is coming off of the internal diameter of the tape itself. So the only way to get this thing to spool up again will be to recreate that natural tension, which will allow, as the tape is pulled from the center hub, it will allow the tape to be taken up. And of course it has to be spliced, and you got to get all the twists and kinks out of it before splicing it together, otherwise you'll end up with a bunch of loops and kinks in the tape. So this would be a huge job to try to put this back together with really no reward, because there's nothing on this tape that's worth keeping. So in other words, if I pull tape from the inside of the reel, you'll see that it'll wind up faster on the outside, and that will take up what I pulled off of it to tighten the loop. And that's precisely how 8-track tapes work. They work on the principle that the diameter in the center of the loop is smaller than the diameter on the outside, so it will always try to take the tape in faster than it comes off. This was also used in the cart tapes that were used in radio stations, but they were typically a shorter tape. They were typically 5 minutes long, a 5-minute tape, although the tape did run at twice the speed for the cart machines. They ran at 7.5, and the consumer 8-track machines ran at 3 3/4 IPS. But the same principle. The cart machines did not have the internal pinch roller, though. They had a hole in the bottom of the cartridge, and the capstan, or the pinch roller, came up from the bottom of the player. It would lie flat, and then when the cartridge was inserted, it would flip up into position so that a solenoid could engage that. The capstan was always spinning on one of the cart machines, and a solenoid would engage the external pinch roller for instant cueing, instant starting. 8-track, on the other hand, the capstan or the pinch roller was part of the cassette or the cartridge, and the capstan shaft itself was what drove it. Just pressure. There's a spring that fits into the slot that holds the cartridge in position, so that there's pressure placed between the internal pinch roller and the capstan shaft of the player. So now I've retensioned this. All I would need to do is sort out all this tape, make sure that there's no kinks in it, splice it back to here, and then I could just continue to pull the tape, and it would eventually drag all this tape back into the spool, and in theory the tape would be fixed. About 40 feet of tape later, I have all the kinks out. The rest of the tape's all piled up there, and I just so happen to have some sensing foil, which is what's used to put these tapes back together. If you're wondering why, well, why not? Even though I know that there's nothing on this tape that is of any value to anybody, just for the hell of it, I'm going to put this tape back together, because I do have the sensing tape that's required to do it. And I should have all the kinks out of this, I think. So we'll just pull about 1 inch or so of the sensing tape off and snip it. Good enough. And we'll stick it to the front side of the tape. As I say, I think I've got all of the kinks out. So we'll stick it onto the front side of the tape here, because that's where it goes to sense the track change. And then we'll stick the other side onto this side of the tape over here to stick the tape back together. Roughly. Trim it off a bit to make sure that there's no ragged edges. And now, if I were to pull from the center, I should wind all this back into the cartridge. So here we go. As we pull the tape in, you'll see that it winds up on the outside, and as I continue to do this is going to probably take me a while, but I should eventually get all of that tape pulled back in, and I'll be back at that splice by the time I'm done. But as you can see, the tape is going in faster than it's coming off of the. Just want to make sure that there's no kinks or anything. It's going into the onto the outside of the spool faster than it's coming off on the other side. So here's the last of the tape going back into the shell. As you can see, I'm having to pull from the middle, and it's dragging the rest of the tape in. I've been working on this now for, I don't know, 5 minutes or so. If this was an irreplaceable recording, you would obviously be doing this on a little cleaner surface than what I'm using here. This tape is, I just wasn't paying attention there. I just dropped a loop here. But if you know, this tape here itself is of no value. It's got nothing on it that needs to be recovered. I'm just doing this to show you how to go about fixing one of these tapes where the splice is let go and you've got a pile of tape inside your machine. This is how you have to do it to recover it. Obviously, if this was a priceless recording, you'd be doing this under a cleaner situation. But again, because this is just a junk recording that's not going to be transferred, I just wanted to show you guys how to go about fixing one of these tapes if you ever had to. The key is to make sure that you don't have kinks in it. So you have to kind of go through all the tape and make sure that you are that you don't have any kinks or twists in it. If you have a single loop or something like that, you can always deal with that at the end by looping it around one way or the other to get the kinks out. But the idea is to try to not have any kinks in the tape as you put it back together. And as I finish this up here, the last of this will spool back in. Ideally, you don't want it to be loose like this. You want it to be tight. This will tighten itself up on playback. It'll tighten itself up, but ideally, you'd want to have that little tighter packed. And then I can put it back through the guides and put the last of it into the shell. Another problem with 8-track tapes is that the foam pads go bad. That's what puts pressure on the heads and the sensing mechanism. These foam pads do go bad. You can use bits of, I think weather stripping was someone told me you could use for this. Maybe I was wrong, but you can buy this foam like this. Again, I'm not going to do anything on this tape because this tape is not going to be recovered. We're not going to be transferring this tape over. I just wanted to get it back into the shell to show you guys how to go about doing that, and then we would take the rest of the shell and put it back together just like that. And if I plug this tape in, it should play. Let's try it. Now we'll just test it, make sure it plays. And there it is. It's fixed. That's how you fix an 8-track that the splice is broken on. And if the tape itself is wrinkled and kinked, you're going to hear it in the actual playback. Again, I advise this just if you've got a tape that you need to digitize and you need to fix it, that's the way to do it. If it's an irretrievable recording, obviously cleanliness is important. I didn't worry too much about that here because this tape is nothing special. This was not being transferred anyway. Client that brought me this brought me a few other tapes. One of his other tapes I have to go through as well because it is actually jammed. It won't play. It is seized. So we'll do one on that when I get to that. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.